BlogTalkRadio, the world's largest online radio network.
Is it possible to read a person's thoughts? Can we implant thoughts also? Is there evidence of the existence of God? Does USGS records show increases in earthquakes due to nuclear testing? Author Jose Collazo says yes, and he has the proof in his 3 books titled America's New Slavery, fMRI Technology, America's New Slavery Behind the Scenes and Update, God Does Exist, No More Nuclear Testing, and much more. Researched under the Freedom of Information Act and other sources, Jose Collazo has the proof to most of his claims and is investigating others. You can get copies of his books on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or www.xlibris.com. That's www.xlibris.com, or you can click the book banner on the main page right next to the chat room on www.latenightinthe.midlands.com. Get your copy now. Are you looking for ways to get your business or website noticed? In these tough times, are you looking for ways to increase sales? Well, you're in luck. Late Night in the Midlands is a great way to get your message to the masses without spending all your hard-earned dollars. We offer affordable packages for on-air runs and make it easy for you to purchase ad space on the website. If it is just a banner ad placement you're looking for, go to www.latenightinthe.midlands.com, and on the right-hand side under the player, you will see your options. Select your option and email your banner to us at latenightinthe.midlands@yahoo.com, and we can have you being seen by thousands upon thousands around the world who visit the Late Night in the Midlands website. Or, if it's an on-air run you're interested in, then contact me at latenightinthe.midlands@yahoo.com, and let's work out a deal you can afford and start letting us help you be noticed.
You are listening to Mysterious Realms Radio with Dr. John DeSalvo. You can call in with your questions at 858-683-1309. This number is also posted at our radio website, which is drjohnradio.com. At this site, you can see our upcoming guest schedule, information about our guests, and download past programs for free. Now back to Mysterious Realms with Dr. John.
Welcome back, and I tell you, that was some interview with Barbara. I wish she could be on another couple hours. Just an incredible lady. And again, we'll get her back on again soon, and I'm sure you enjoyed it as much as I did. You know, during the break, I was kind of thinking what to rerun for this segment, and I uploaded this show with Dr. Carl Johan Kalaman, the author of the Mayan calendar, and I thought, you know, we're quoting him and talking about him during the show and his books, and I thought, well, for listeners, they may be interested in hearing a little bit more about him. And his interview is a little over an hour, so you know we could get it in before the end of the show time. And I think you'll find it fascinating. His is one of the first books that I read. I also, since I probably won't be able to do the credits, I just want to briefly thank Glenn Kennedy and Michael Vera for making the show possible, and our announcer Fred Kohler and Derek Audette and ClassicalIndia.com for permission to use their music. And the show is sponsored by Late Night in the Midlands Radio and RadioNsearch Social Network. And all our shows are on drjohnradio.com. And, you know, please listen to us every Saturday night. So I just wanted to get the ending credits in now. And what I'll do is I will run the Dr. Carl Johan Kalaman show, and then that will end the program close to midnight Eastern Standard Time. And then don't forget, next week we got an exciting show on Atlantis. So all the upcoming shows are on our website. So thank you so much for listening tonight. I want to thank Barbara Han-Clow, and please hold on, and I will be running the show with Dr. Carl Johan Kalaman. So good night, and may God be with all of you.
You're about to enter Mysterious Realms Radio with Dr. John DeSalvo. Prepare to open your mind for an exciting adventure with the unknown, the unexplained, and the mysterious.
Welcome to Mysterious Realms Radio. This is John DeSalvo, and today we'll be exploring the mysterious realm of the Mayan calendar with our special guest, Dr. Carl Johan Kalaman. Now, since Dr. Kalaman can only be on with us for about 1 hour, we will not be taking calls, so I want to bring him on right away after his intro and not do a lot of the beginning introductory information. We will be having a full program tonight, so please stay tuned after his interview. Now, our special guest tonight, Dr. Carl Johan Kalaman, is considered to be the foremost expert and visionary on the Mayan calendar. He holds a Ph.D. in physical biology and has served as an expert on cancer for the World Health Organization. He began his studies on the Mayan calendar in 1971. His best-selling book, The Mayan Calendar and the Transformation of Consciousness, is a revolutionary new way to understand this calendar system and what it means for us today in the 21st century. He also discusses why many people today, including myself, feel that time is speeding up. Dr. Kalaman lives in Sweden, and his website is Kalaman.com, Calleman.com, and it is linked up at our radio website of drjohnradio.com. Now, I'd like to welcome our special guest tonight, Dr. Kalaman, to the program. Hello, Dr. Kalaman, and thanks for being with us tonight.
Oh, hello, John. It's my pleasure. Very nice to be on your show.
Well, I tell you, I've been very excited about having you on because your book is one of my favorites of all time. I believe it is one of the best on the Mayans and their calendar system, and every page in that book is loaded with information, and it's just wonderful. And I thank you for writing it and congratulate you on doing such an excellent work.
Oh, thank you very much for saying that. Thank you. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe you could start. I always find. Oh, by the way, your background is just incredible. I didn't realize you were a graduate student in toxicology at the University of Stockholm. You worked in the Department of Environmental Health at the University of Washington in Seattle, the World Health Organization. Amazing. It's wonderful to see people with such good credentials and a scientific background get into these areas. But it seems like you got interested in the Mayans in 1979 on a trip you made, I guess, to Mexico. Maybe you could tell us about that and your experience and, how you, for the next 20 or 30 years of your life, got involved in studying this.
Yeah. Well, it's at that time I was, as you said, a graduate student at the University of Stockholm, and I was working in laboratories pretty much all the time, doing experiments and so forth. And but there was some time I just saw there was on a bulletin board there somebody advertising the chance to go to Mexico and learn Spanish and live in a Mexican family. And well, it just sort of for no apparent reason attracted me, even though I had always been very interested in history, and there was always some attraction with the Mexican pyramids. There's a sort of an enigma in the very fact that people built these kind of pyramids both in the New World, in the Americas, and in the Old World, and at approximately the same time. And so that's the kind of enigma that I had in the back of my head. And so I decided to go for this language school, and it was much, it's hard to almost remember the way things were before the internet existed. That was much more of a exotic chance-taking, so to speak, and I had no idea really where I would end up. And as it turned out, I arrived in Mexico City on the Day of the Dead, unbeknownst to myself, with this enormous chaos of everybody who had been visiting, having had their dinners out on the in the cemeteries with their deceased family members and so forth. And I came to this little village outside of Mexico City in the middle of the night where skeletons were hanging from the light poles, and it was I was immediately somehow just brought into a completely different kind of world compared to the laboratory in Stockholm. And well, it sort of continued on that way. I really loved the Mexican way, the colorful, the lively ways that they had, and also then it was sort of almost like I was very strongly attracted just to go down as a backpacker down to southern Mexico, to Guatemala and to the Yucatan Peninsula, and where not only did I see some of the ancient Mayan sites, and was really fascinated by them, and also I had contacts with very sporadic but very important contacts nonetheless with Mayan people that I could would run into, and I felt very much a kinship with them, and what seemed so strange really was that they seemed to see something special in me also, which I had no idea why it was, but there was just somehow they treated me differently than other backpackers there, and they, for instance, they would come up somebody out of nowhere and give me some kind of an amulet or something like that in the middle of the street and say, this is for you, and then the person would disappear and I would never see them again. But it was sort of somehow that feeling that what is this? What is this all about? And it was very pleasant. The whole experience was very, very pleasant, and really just came to this experience that there is some kind of a purpose to life, or more specifically to my own life, and that somehow that purpose was there, and that experience stayed with me, and it took a long time, or maybe 13 years after that, until I actually started to work with the Mayan calendar independently, like authentically.
Oh, really? About 13 years, a special number too, right?
Yes, it turned out to be that way, and it turns out that many of my many things in my life actually follow these kind of numbers, and it's not like I plan it that way. It's just turns out that way, and I only see it in retrospect. But yes, that is true. That's 13 years. Yes.
Maybe the people, when you went there, the shamans, and they sensed you had a special mission to bring this information to the world, and that's why maybe you were accepted. Did you feel any kind of spiritual or psychic, non-physical feelings being there around the monuments and temples and pyramids?
Well, yeah, I think that is what I think basically what it is that this I really came to. I was sort of born with this kind of task, but then it took us until I actually came to this area. Nobody triggered that particular mission that I had, and but I would say that at that point yet I had hardly any sort of spiritual experiences, but there was a strong feeling of attraction and attachment or attraction to the people and to the sites, and so there was really no need, you might say, for me to have any spiritual experiences to at that point.
Sure. Maybe
later, though.
Yeah, I was just curious because I know, like, when people who visited the pyramids, the Great Pyramid, and other places, some may have a mystical experience and some may not. Sometimes the people you expect to have it don't, and people that you least expect to have it, have that experience. So, it's not something you can guess. I know one of the most interesting aspects of your work is the calendar system, because the whole concept of our time speeding up. Maybe could you, I know it's real hard on the radio without any visuals and limited time, but kind of briefly describe the three calendar systems that were in use in the Mayan civilization?
Yeah, well, I should say, if we're talking about the ancient Maya, and this is about 1,000 years ago, or starting around the time of Christ, and then about 1,000 years more, very, very roughly spoken. They had a very complicated calendar system with tracking many different cycles, and so it's hard to say that they had 3 calendars or that they had 10 calendars or 20 calendars. They had a number of different ones. What I studied that quite early on, even when I was first time in Mexico, and later I came to the realization that these various calendars have correspond to shifts in the world, in the history of the world. And then I decided simply to extract the particular calendars that was of interest for that. In other words, those that were of interest for us who live today, in order to understand our own evolution. And that also meant sort of a choice, that there were certain calendars that I decided I'm not going to focus on these because they seem to have very little to tell us about our particular evolution.
Sure.
And, but then instead I focused on the 9 waves, the 9. Sometimes I use the Aztec word of underworlds. But there are 9 calendrical cycles that each proceed in 13 steps, and the reason being that as I continue to study these, I found that this is indisputably linked to shifts in the way the human beings have lived their life. And to significance, not only events, but the way that people have looked upon the world and created in the world, and so forth. And those 9 waves, as I prefer to call them today, 9 waves that are, each is a wave of 13 steps, 13 time periods, which can be subdivided then, so that there are 7 of those that are like peaks in the wave, or periods of light in the wave, when things move forward in human history. And then they alternate with periods that are you might call valleys, or nights, dark periods, where the history basically rests and prepares for the next peak in the wave. History is not a linear process, as we really know from our experience. But when you study the Mayan calendar, this becomes very clear that it's wave-like, and the pendulum sort of swings back and forth in how human history is being developed. 9 waves, each in 13 time periods. But then what comes to that in addition is that these 9 waves, they do not all have the same frequency. In other words, the shifts between these peaks and the valleys happen at different frequencies in each one of them. And when you look at a Mayan pyramid, some of the most famous ones of them at least, they are built in 9 levels and 9 terraces, you might say, where each terrace becomes smaller than the one it stands upon. And what this symbolizes is that the frequency increases when you climb these pyramids. And so every time you climb a pyramid to a higher level, it means that the wave will have a 20 times faster, higher frequency, or that the time periods become 20 times shorter.
So the way of looking at it is, if you had like a stick divided into those segments, we normally look at linear things, all of them equal, but what you're saying is you go like from one segment to the next, it's a 20-time increment, and then a 20 times to the next one. So yeah, it seems like is that correct? Is that correct way of looking
correct.
at it?
Yes, that is correct. And the result is that whenever one of these new waves on top of the lower wave, so to speak, is activated, a wave with a 20 times higher frequency is activated, and we who are sort of being influenced by these waves, we think that there is a 20 times speed up in the time. Time passes faster, time accelerates. And this is because of these sort of increasing frequency of shift as you climb to higher and higher levels of the pyramid.
You know what I just realized too? I'm kind of thinking that the Mayan calendar forced time into this, but it's that the Mayans had the spiritual understanding that this is how time operates, so their calendar is based on true spiritual principles, where ours is just based on an arbitrary linear sequence. Is that correct?
Oh, this is a wonderful insight, and it's very crucial to the whole thing. You know, we think of a calendar that as if something, you know, that we make up. Usually, we have made up in our calendar system that there should be 12 months, and they should have certain number of days to fit the year. But this is sort of a made up. It's sort of our own Gregorian calendar is basically a human-made calendar. We decided this is the best way of fitting things to follow a year. But as you're saying here, the Mayan calendar is entirely different. They use their spiritual intuition in order to find out what are the actual waves that are changing our consciousness, which is a completely different thing compared to the other calendars of the world that are basically just trying to fit together the moon phases and the solar year and so forth.
Sure.
And then with some human elaboration invent a calendar. And this is completely different from the Maya. This is maybe the most fundamental differences, and it's also at the very heart of why the Mayan calendar is so interesting, because it's not a human-made calendar. It's a human reflection of the divine cycles, and that's a different thing.
Like as above, so below, basically, that it's reflecting the. So this is why everyone, including myself, who I always say I have very little psychic ability, is feeling this accelerating time, because we're moving from one segment to the next segment. We're getting this 20 increase. When was the last approximate when we had the next jump to the 20 time period?
Well, I would say that now there will not be any more acceleration of time. There was a ninth wave, the top level of the pyramid, so to speak, that was activated on last year, March 9th, and it brought into existence a wave that had a higher frequency than any that had ever existed previously in the universe. And this wave, it continues. But as far as I can see, there will not be another time acceleration. And but it is interesting, you know. The reason I've been working with the Mayan calendar is really that I think it has something to help us understand the way history and our own time is developing. And so we may wonder then, we may ask the question, well, what happened when this particular wave was activated March 9th last year? And for most people, it may not, nothing may immediately come to the mind. But I was, of course, very observant at this time of exactly what would happen. And so for one thing, 2 days after this wave had been activated, there was the big earthquake in Japan. The nuclear crisis in Japan, the tsunami in Japan, and in the very same week, the wars in Libya and Syria would begin, and this is it's sort of the beginning of a big movement, you might say, across the world that happened essentially last year, where people were really sort of saying that, you might say, protesting against the established order in different ways. And they were, in that particular beginning of that wave, there were so many things happening that it was actually difficult for what were you supposed to focus on. And the American news magazine Newsweek, a week later it had on its cover the saying "Apocalypse Now," and basically saying that there's a tremendous amount of things happening right now, and the economic analysts can no longer. There's too many cross currents in the world economy of the world that they can't really target anything, or they can't really identify which are the important factors and so forth. So there was a really strong sense at that particular time that here there is much more happening in a very short period of time in some very unusual way that we had not experienced before. And so the way just let me finish that. That the way I looked upon is that this is what time acceleration is about. More important changes is being compressed in a short period of time, and that's why it's all happening now because the ninth wave had been activated.
So the spiritual principle or waves or cosmic laws obviously are affecting our physical world. Again, the Rosicrucian statement, as above, so below. Now, what about December 21st, 2012? I know you and I, it's not going to be the end of the world, but how does that date figure into this time accelerating in the calendar system?
Well, the way I look upon it, it's basically just a miscalculation. So I don't expect any kind of inherent change happening of that. I don't, on my own part, expect any energetic shift to happen on that particular day. Now, on the other hand, this is a day that, this is what's come across to people, sometimes with a negative connotation, but there's also a lot of people that have some kind of a positive connotation to it. And certainly if enough of people on this particular date are focusing on some collective union, some kind of shift that we might want to see happen in the world, then this particular date might bring it. But my own view is that it doesn't, there's no automatic reason to believe that anything would happen at that date. It's more like a miscalculation.
Well, that makes sense. Again, talking to my spiritual friends and people that have clairvoyant ability, they exactly like what you predicted and discussed, that there's an accelerating time going on, but also that there's it's going to be maybe like a new beginning, a new spiritual awakening. So most of the spiritual people I talk to look at this as a positive time, a rejuvenation maybe of the spiritual worlds and the earth. Again, who knows? It's good to hear that, because I'm tired of the doom and gloom prophecies, which I feel have no basis at all in science. No. But it's very, very fascinating. The other thing is your book has so much information in it, and it's just amazing. Like I truly recommend that to anyone who really wants a good idea of this whole system and the calendar and what's going on. And you even have a section in there on Blavatsky and Edgar Casey. I don't know. Maybe you could. We're coming up to a half-hour break. Maybe you could, through the next 3 or 4 minutes, briefly talk about Blavatsky and Casey and some of their statements and how it kind of fits in with your work.
When it comes to Blavatsky, to begin with, I used to belong to the American Theosophical Society, and I basically still look upon that as a sort of a good, very responsible esoteric group, so I've learned a little bit from them about the work of Blavatsky, I guess what I've been talking about there is that she would also, when I talked about the 13 steps, I would talk about subdividing it, you might say, in 7 peaks and 6 valleys, and which is really what I'm saying here is that there is a reality basis to the fact that so many traditions have talked about the number 7 as being a holy number, and I think in my book I refer to Blavatsky's idea of sort of 7 root races, as she would call it, 7 groups of people.
Right.
And the way I look upon it is that really these waves, they are bringing into existence, they're changing the human beings every time they're activated. So we're not the same as people were, whatever, 100 years ago, or 1,000 years, or 100,000 years ago. And the reason is not that we change biologically. Biologically, we're the same, but the reason is that these waves that have been activated have been changing us on a more mental and spiritual level, and in some very rudimentary form, I think that this is something that you can find in the work of Blavatsky.
Yeah, I was going to say, why I find this so fascinating is that I was reading through your book, and again, your book is not easy reading. It takes time, but because every sentence in there means something, which is really nice. As I was reading through it, I've been reading Blavatsky for at least 20 or 30 years, and I kept coming. What about the root races? And then I got to your section on, and I thought I should have known you're going to cover that. You cover everything else.
Yeah, that's nice to hear. Yeah.
But
I'd like to add that
sure.
She was living in a time when not even the Mayan calendar system had not been elucidated. Nobody at that point knew about the Mayan calendar system, and so she could not possibly have known that there was this sort of people that had existed much earlier in history that had actually charted these different time periods and made it all real. I don't know if she even knew about the Maya. She probably knew about the Maya. The people probably had heard about it in the 1870s and so forth, but they certainly didn't know anything about the calendar system. So she could not have sort of made any connections directly to what we now know about it.
But that's a good point, and I probably got about 50 books on her life, about her, letters, and obviously the Secret Doctrine and Isis Unveiled is her two major works. I recommend those to any listeners, but I'll tell you, you're going to probably have to read them about a dozen times before you start even breaking the surface, right, Carl? I mean, it's just amazing studies. We're up to our about a 2-minute break, and when we come back, maybe we can talk a little bit about the Schumann resonance, which I find very fascinating, and you have the best coverage of that than any book that I've ever read. So if you could just hang on for a couple minutes, we're taking a short break. We're talking to Dr. Carl Johan Kalaman about the Mayan calendar, and you're listening to Mysterious Realms, and we'll be back in a few short minutes, so please stay tuned.
Realms Radio with Dr. John DeSalvo. You can call in with your questions at 858-683-1309. This number is also posted at our radio website, which is drjohnradio.com. At this site, you can see our upcoming guest schedule, information about our guests, and download past programs for free. Now back to Mysterious Realms with Dr. John.
Welcome back. We're talking to Dr. Carl Johan Kalaman, best-selling author of The Mayan Calendar, which I strongly recommend. You can visit Dr. Kalaman's website, and also there's links to his books at Kalaman, CALLEMAN.com, or if you go to drjohnradio.com on our radio website, click on his name, and it'll bring you right to his site. Carl, I got to say, not only I do feel your book is the best one on the Mayans, but also Barbara Hand-Clow's book. And actually, Barbara Hand-Clow's coming on our show next month. And I think, didn't you write the foreword to her book, or she wrote one to yours?
Yes, I did.
I can't remember.
I did, yes. At least to the Mayan Code, I wrote the foreword, yes.
Oh, excellent book. So I've been bragging. I have the two top experts in the world on the Mayans on my radio show in less than a month. But maybe we can talk a little bit about the Schumann resonance, because that's something, as a biophysicist, have really fascinated me. Maybe you could explain what it is and how it ties in with your work? Again, fascinating area.
Well, it's a wave, an electromagnetic wave that has been discovered. I think it was in the 60s or something like that. That was discovered to surround the surface of the Earth, and I think it is close to. It's somewhere around 7.5 hertz, which is really a very low frequency by most standards. Mm-hmm. And it attracted attention for the reason that that particular frequency it coincides with the lower range of the alpha waves in the brains, and meaning that the suggestion was made not by myself originally, but by some other people, that maybe the reason our brains, when we are in the resting state, that their dominating wave will be this so-called alpha wave, the wave of relaxation, or the state of relaxation, I should say, for the very reason that at that state we were in resonance with the wave of the Earth, this electromagnetic wave of the Earth. And this particular wave was named from a German scientist by the name of Schumann, who first discovered it. And what I might have added to this is to put it in somewhat of a bigger context, so that I have seen that not only this particular frequency of the alpha state, but also the other frequencies, like that of the beta state, or of the delta or theta states, which are the really low frequency waves, that these may be also be reflective of frequencies that appeared as resonances when we were in resonance with different inner segments of the Earth, meaning that this is kind of an interesting thing, because it implies that our thinking may occur very much as a resonance phenomenon with the Earth, and our thinking is not really as many people would think. It's not something that just happens inside of our heads. Thinking, mental activities in general, are actually resonance phenomena with the Earth. But then, as you know, when in a 24-day cycle, we go through different states, different states of consciousness, like resting and sleeping, and sometimes we're very analytically, mentally sharp, and that's when we are up in the beta state of the mind, and what I then came to suggest was simply that over the 24-hour period, we are going through periods of being in resonance with the outer space, and then coming back also to the inner core of the Earth, which corresponds to 13 hertz. Which is the beta frequency of the mind, which is a frequency that our brains are in when we are doing sort of sharp, analytical, crystal clear thinking, you might say. And the funny thing about it is that the inner core of the Earth which would then also have a 13 hertz frequency, is believed today to be a kind of a crystal, have a crystalline structure like made up from iron and nickel, and so that sort of makes sense then. If when we are crystal clear, when we're analytical and sharp, then we're in resonance with the crystal of the earth. On the other hand, when we are sleeping, then we're not resonance with anything solid or structured like that. Then our minds goes out in the atmosphere basically to be in resonance with those parts of the Earth system, and there all kinds of the structured thinking basically disappears. So this is my take on this particular thing, and I think the point to drive home is really that we are often deluding ourselves if we think that the thinking only goes on in our heads. Instead, I would say thinking is about being in resonance with the planet, and that's what creates our thinking.
You know, I love the figure you give in your book showing the different cores of the Earth and the Van Allen belts and how it's related to the different wave states. Why this appealed to me so much is I used to teach neurophysiology and even biofeedback, and what you have I've never seen before. And again, why it fascinated me is this whole idea that the Earth may give off this, around between a 7 and 8 cycle per second wave that I hear some people could actually claim that they could hear. But the idea, like the Native Americans and people that sleep on the ground or close to the Earth are more in tune with the rhythm of the Earth and the spiritual resonance. And I heard a rumor years ago that NASA put on like a 7.5 generator on some of the spacecrafts because they found out the astronauts didn't react well. But I couldn't follow up on that. That has been really denied. So that may be, I don't know if you know if that was true or not. I couldn't find any evidence to support that.
Yeah, I've also heard that rumor, and it's the kind of thing that I don't know whether it's actually the case or not.
Yeah, I tried checking through like my contacts at JPL and NASA, and according to that, it just was made up. But it doesn't matter. But again, that you're just pulling this together and tying it in with the Mayan calendar and the brainwaves. It's a very comprehensive way of looking at it, and I think you're really onto something in terms of the significance of what's happening in this year or this next century. So yes. What is what's kind of the next step that you're really going to look into? Because at this point, you've made some incredible discoveries, relationships, analogies. Are you looking for some kind of overall method or some kind of overall enlightenment or something that will pull all our spiritual knowledge together? I know it's a big question, but
well, at this point I'm writing a new book, and it's getting to be almost ready, and it's going to be called The Evolution of the Mind, and it will deal with many other aspects that I haven't covered before, and it really will. The idea is really to tie together the mind with the Mayan calendar. That what we talked about here, I think is just a beginning of that, and now I'm doing this in a very solid way. Now. When it comes to this with enlightenment, I mean that's more. I don't really look upon that as coming out of any intellectual activities like what I'm engaging in now, I hope to if I can contribute to something to point out a little bit more of sort of the path there or so forth. I'm not sure about that, whether I'll be able to do that, because my task, the way I look upon it, is more to provide the intellectual background or the scientific background, and doing it in a very, very large-scale holistic framework, so to speak, and hopefully it will just give people some of the confidence that they may need, or maybe not everyone will need it, but some will need it to see the whole picture and to see what that indeed enlightenment is something to strive for, and it's something that would help our species, but it's that by itself, that particular path, I think is sort of non-intellectual in nature, and something that people will have to find themselves, and certainly a critical thing is really to decide that this is something they want, and so forth. But in that regard, I'm just looking as much as everybody else, I would say.
Well, this is I think that would be an admirable thing to do. Again, as a physicist, we're always looking at trying to find a unified field theory to put everything, in one equation and one explanation, and I guess that's the goal of humanity: enlightenment, the spiritual oneness, understanding how everything fits together. A thought just came to me, and I don't remember reading this in your book. Again, there's so many things. I mean, it's hard to remember. I think you even mentioned the Lord of the Rings, if I'm not mistaken, and Harry Potter at one part in your book. But ley lines. People have always asked me about ley lines with the pyramids and Stoneheads. Any ley line studies done with the Mexican pyramids and temples?
I think I have seen that. I mean, I cannot imagine that it has not been done. There are so many people that are suggesting these different kind of connections between sacred sites and so forth. But I would not, I wouldn't really know about it. So I'm sorry, I can't really go into that. But I certainly know that a lot of people have are looking at these kind of things.
I know I'll get a lot of emails about that if I didn't ask you. So, I know that there's such a big interest. What about? I know you mention it in your book, but I'm not sure you actually say what you think they are. You mentioned UFOs. I think, if I'm not mistaken, you said you didn't think they were extraterrestrial visitors, but I can't remember what you thought they would be. Yeah.
Well, I think it is. I don't think they are nuts and bolts, so to speak. I do think it's more like some kind of a spirit beings. This is something I'm actually devoting quite a lot to in my coming book, because I just touched upon it before. And I think it is something that human beings may experience if there is a dimensional shift in our minds. So they exist, as far as I can understand, as waveforms. But I don't think they exist in the same physical sense as the rest of the world. One of the things that I want to point to here is there's been this alien abduction phenomenon that's been talked about for at least 20 years. And an interesting thing is the study that's made by Dr. Strassman, who works with a DMT, this hallucinogenic molecule that is a normal part of our metabolism. He injected people, volunteers, with this substance, This is about 20 years ago, and he wrote this book called DMT, the Spirit Molecule, about it. And what was interesting was that in these, what would you call it, under the influence of this psychedelic, a high proportion, I think at least 20% of the people that was there experienced exactly the same kind of things as somebody who has experienced a alien abduction. In other words, they got to, in their minds, they had these meetings with aliens that wanted to abduct them. And what is interesting about that is that Dr. Strassman sat at the bedside of these people all the time, taking notes of what they were saying and experiencing, but at the same time the conclusion is clearly they were not in a physical sense abducted to some kind of a UFO. But they had the experience of having been that. So my and of course that's his hypothesis himself, that the experience was caused by this dimensional shift that this particular hallucinogen created in these people. But at the same time, and yes, it seems they have some kind of a reality in that dimension, but they did not have a reality in the normal physical dimension that we're living in. So that's sort of my basic take on it, or that they're not nuts and bolts as far as I can tell.
So you're not basically saying it's a hallucination, but that is opening up like a kind of maybe another dimension or kind of spiritual realm that they're either accessing through their being or, you know, you should
just let me say that I don't want to say that it's a hallucination in the sense of delusion. I do believe that they may exist on a spirit level, but they're not here in the physical sense that you and I are.
Sure. You know, if you get a chance, you may want to try to listen to one of our past shows. I think it was June 16th with Becky Andreasen, who I've worked with Becky for many years. Her mom is Betty Andreasen. I'm sure you're familiar with the Andreasen affair, the most famous abductee of all time. Very consistent with what you said about the UFOs being spiritual beings, angelic, and I think Ray Fowler wrote five volumes on that whole situation over a 20-year period. But when you start researching that for your next book, you may want to look into that, and I'd be glad to help you any way that I can.
Oh, thank you.
Becky is just an amazing person in terms of this whole area. And now, maybe you could help me with one question. This is what bothered me studying Mesoamerica. I know originally everyone thought the Mayans and were like peaceful shamans and farmers, and then when they started really understanding the glyphs, they realized they were very warlike people, the human sacrifices and bloodletting. I just find it such a dichotomy where they have this high spiritual attunement with the universe and the calendar, and yet they were doing the most horrific human sacrifices. And I can't seem to put that together. Maybe you could give me some insight on, how that do you think happened in that society?
Well, personally, I've never thought of the Maya as angels, I only thought this is a people that has a big part of knowledge. They knew some things. And leaving completely outside whether they were ethically developed or not. And I don't see that necessarily as being different from some modern scientists that, they might have one of the most developed minds of our planet, and yet we're, participating in creating nuclear weapons and these kind of things. The mental person, the intelligent person, and then we could talk about the Maya in the sense of time. They certainly were very intelligent, it's no guarantee for being ethical and what you called good people. On the other hand, and as you're saying, it seems quite clear that they also had wars and they also had human sacrifices. But I don't see any reason to sort of overemphasize that. So in that area, so did pretty much everyone else. My own ancestors among the Vikings, they would have human sacrifices, and they were just probably much more warlike than the Maya ever were. It wasn't like huge armies participating in the warfare of the Maya. They were, but yes, they were not angels. And having said that, as I said again, I don't see any reason to think of them as being either worse or better than any other people of this planet, ethically speaking, but they had a knowledge about time that was outstanding compared to most others.
No, that's a good way of looking at it. I mean, we've had our own inquisitions and all kinds of different things, and I think that was one of the reasons it took me so long to really want to study the Mayans, because that whole idea really repulsed me, and I thought, I do not want to study a culture that was so barbaric and just to me is so anti-goodness. And then actually your book was one of the first I picked up and gave me a whole new perspective. And I think you're right. I kind of resolved it in almost the same way what you've said, is that, and plus maybe that was more of the warring section of the society, like we have our political section,
Yes.
And you did have the priests and like we have now, people that meditate and pray and try to become one with God, and so you're right. I think you're going to find this throughout all history and whatever culture, whatever phenomenal discoveries they made. There's going to be a dark side that you have to maybe not accept, but understand that that's a different aspect.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, we got a couple minutes left. Anything do you want to give out your website or anything you'd like to recommend for our listeners to follow up on?
Well, yes, I want to let them know the website Calleman.com, CALLEMAN, and there are 3 books that I have published previously. The first one is called Solving the Greatest Mystery of Our Time. The second one is the one you read, the Mayan Calendar and the Transformation of Consciousness. And the third one is The Purposeful Universe, which is really another theory of evolution. It challenges Darwinism, not in the traditional sort of creationist view, saying that there was no evolution. It's absolutely clear that there was evolution, but it challenges the idea that this is an accident, that evolution proceeds just through accidents, and instead it sees a meaningful plan behind the fact that we've come to exist on this planet as human beings and having the kind of biological nature that we do. Now I'm working on my what will then be my 4th book in this field, which I wouldn't say that it's about the Mayan calendar, but the Mayan calendar is such a powerful tool for understanding time and evolution that it becomes one. And that particular book, this one that I'm working on, I can't say exactly when it will come out. It's about the evolution of the mind, and it sees that the evolution of the mind is something that also follows a time plan, and it tells us a lot about the mechanisms of action of for instance, psychedelics. It also tells us about these kind of phenomena like UFOs and so forth, and it's more about the mind, about the nature of the mind. Ultimately, seeing that this is something there is a global mind that is driving us ultimately, and for us, our evolution of our mind is really about hooking up to this global mind and doing it in the right way, which is something that we need to make a choice about, I think. So these are things that's where it's going right now.
Well, I'm looking forward to that next book, and I'll probably wind up reading your other books. I'm still trying to get through Awakening, Barbara Hand Clow's book, which is such a long book before she comes on. Yeah. And because I do read the books of my guests because first of all, I'm interested in it, and I think it's important for me to be well versed. Well, listen, I wish you could stay with us longer. I know you have other commitments, and I can't thank you enough, Carl, for coming on. I have been looking forward to this program. I mean, you could be on and again with all the information in your book, and I give your book a strong. We have the same publisher too, Inner Traditions. They're wonderful, and I actually have John Hayes coming on, the public relations director, to launch Inner Traditions Month, which is August. We have all Inner Traditions authors. So I hope you can listen. Carl, listen. Best of luck with your work and research.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on, and I know the listening audience is thrilled. So listen, you take care. God bless you, and hope you come on again soon, Carl. Take care, my friend.
Bye-bye.
Take care. That was Dr. Carl Johan Kalaman and his best-selling book, The Mayan Calendar, and you can go to his site as Kalaman.com, CALLEMAN.com. And please stay tuned because we're going to have more on the Mayans tonight. I guess tonight will be a Mayan evening, and we'll be back in about 3 minutes, so please stay tuned.
Blog Talk Radio, where millions of hosts and listeners gather.